that's why I won't be doing my route today. Somebody else is going to do it, my bingo route. That is why I won't be going to my bingo meeting or my Qantas meeting tonight. That's why I missed a bunch of stuff during the week. I've pretty well stayed isolated, which I should do. Not much more I can do about that.
But did you go in for the show with the show with Paul K. Lemire?
No, I did not.
Oh, I'm sure he wants it. I'm sure he wants COVID.
He says he's already had it, but he's had evidently he's had a mild dose, and I would say that this is a mild dose too. It hasn't hurt me.
Yeah.
But what I keep telling everybody is that 20 of the 91, like I always get this. Well, it's just a flu. It wasn't really. I get this a lot from people. It really wasn't all that, and the vaccines hurt people and all that. No.
Well,
I mean, the evidence is like, yeah, every vaccine's going to have a drawback, no matter what it is.
Yeah, vaccines hurt some people, but then drugs hurt some people. Any drug you pick hurts some people. If you're in the wrong group, you get hurt. You can get hurt by it. It's a fact of life.
One thing they don't really like is myocarditis and other things they're talking about, increase in amount of susceptibility to diabetes is another one. These are very rare. And what people don't realize is that COVID did those things more than the vaccines did. Yeah. COVID made more people susceptible to diabetes than any of the vaccines did. COVID made everybody more susceptible to myocarditis more than the vaccines did. In other words, if you're a young man and you get COVID, you're going to have, I don't know, maybe 2 out of 10 chances of getting myocarditis. But if you had the vaccine, you may only have a 0.51. You know what I mean? You see?
Yeah. Well, the point being
and people just run with yes, no answers.
Yeah.
It's not really that simple.
Oh, I agree. But every drug that's on the planet has got somebody that can't use it. And I don't mean somebody that can't use it because for example, because if they take it they get mild stomach pains. I mean somebody who can't use it because it could kill them. All right, and that's true with every drug on the planet.
Yeah, and so the ignorance is abounding out there, and it's precipitated by the YouTubers who want to tell everybody fear-mongering stuff. Like I got a friend who regrets very much getting a couple of vaccines because she feels that's going to be problematic for her later on. And Paul K. Lemire thinks everybody's going to start dying in 2025. Anyone who got vaccines, and it's just BS, and it's not science. And I think if I've taken anything away from COVID, is we certainly do not teach our people well enough to understand science and use empirical thought. Good morning, gentlemen, from Robert Dopal, as I hope I pronounced that right.
Yep, I think you have.
And so anyway, so I got the damn bug, COVID. I'm kind of a late bloomer here. Everybody else has had it before I did. Probably something about I was resistant to all the strains up here, but not the one in Costa Rica, evidently.
Yeah.
And so I brought it back from Costa Rica, it seems. And unfortunately, I gave it to 2 other guys.
I haven't had it.
Well, I don't think I would have still had it if I'd stayed here.
No, probably right.
Yeah,
because that's the risk you take. That's the risk you take when you go places, right?
Yeah, they have a different strain there. That now I had imagined that I was just for every different strain that was up here, I was developing immunities to, because let's face it, I've been at crowded lacrosse games, I've been to conventions, I've been to meetings, I've been to bars, and I've never got a sniff. As soon as they said you could take the mask off, I took it off, and I've been that way, and I've never really worried about anything. And then I leave the country and come back with COVID.
Talking about masks, though, there's a lot of people that are still wearing masks.
Yeah, if they're an N95, they'll be protecting themselves. But if they're the blue ones, they're not always that great of a protection for the wearer. They are protecting you from them, though.
Yeah. The funny thing is about the mask is that I've seen a few homeless guys in St. Catharines wearing a mask, the same mask they've probably been wearing in 2020.
Well, it might also be for anonymity purposes as well.
Yeah, well, that's definitely no good. Yeah, and you're right. Anonymity is probably a point there. But I've also seen some other people just wearing those normal masks. They don't go out in public anymore without wearing a mask.
Well, I had a friend that didn't go.
They come in, they go to the bank, they take the mask off.
Some of the people I know still wear N95 if they like. I had a friend of mine who wore N95 masks as long as his mother was alive. Yeah. And his mother was very old and frail, and so he didn't have COVID or anything, but he wore an N95 to do anything, so he didn't bring anything home to his mother.
Oh, but I'm not talking about.
She's passed.
I'm not talking about those N95 masks, but I'm talking about those kind of paper masks almost that you can get, you can get at any store.
The blue ones.
Yeah.
Well, they're quite effective and I have to go back to what everybody's always said and what nobody seems to ever remember is those little blue masks that you wear. We're not protecting you so much, but protecting the other person from you. That's what they are. They're the same kind of surgical masks that the people wear when I got my knee and my hip done. It is what it does is it captures most of the fluids that come out of your mouth, the little spittle and stuff like that that comes out of your mouth when you talk or you breathe, and it captures that, so it limits that amount that goes into the air, so it protects the other people. But if you're breathing from in and around the side of it, and you might take in stuff there so it's not exactly the best protection for you, but it is a very good protection for the other person.
All right. Anyway, okay. So moving on. Colombia. So I've seen some oddities this weekend. I saw last Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Calls by several groups to defund Israel, but could I find any to send you the news articles? No. I did find that Colombia became the latest Latin American country to break diplomatic ties with Israel over its military campaign in Gaza, which is actually kind of odd because the other thing about that is that while breaking ties, they didn't address how this decision could affect Colombia's military, which uses Israeli-made warplanes and machine guns to fight the drug cartels locally, and a free trade agreement between both countries that went into effect in 2020. All right, so didn't really explain how that worked. And also in the region, Bolivia, Belize, and a few other countries have also broken diplomatic ties.
The reason is that here you have a country that's very, very dependent on Israel, particularly the arms that Israel provides to them. They even have a license to manufacture some of the arms that Israel has and has come up with. Also, they use the Israeli fighter jets. And the Israeli armaments have been able to help the Colombian government fight FARC and other groups, particularly the drug lords and so on. However, despite all that, despite that dependency, Colombia cannot find in itself the ability to remain connected with Israel. We don't know how much of a difference this is going to make, but it makes a huge difference diplomatically. We don't like Israel. We don't like what they're doing, despite the fact that we've had close connections with them for many years, and they've helped us a lot. We cannot stand what they're doing. We're going to break off diplomatic connections.
Yeah.
That is a strong statement, and it makes the United States look weaker and weaker every year, or every couple of months when another country does something like this. It makes it very, very clear that nobody likes what Israel is doing, and the only reason why they're able to do it is they get protection from boss man USA.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, of course, is that Turkey has suspended all trade with Israel over its offensive in Gaza, citing the worsening humanitarian tragedy on the Strip. All right, so
Turkey and Israel have had a kind of a hot-cold relationship. Turkey was one of the very first countries to recognize, I think it was the first Muslim country to ever recognize Israel, and that was back in 1949. Now, of course, Turkey's a bit different because Turkey is not an Arab Muslim nation. Turkey is a Turkish Muslim nation. So Turkey at one time
Turkey has also got a fair degree of Christianity as well, not purely Muslim.
No, but I think over 90% Muslim. Even the Kurds, even their ethnic Kurd that they fight with all the time, are Sunni Muslims just like they are. So you have the Turks, you have the Kurds, you have the Armenians, you have Greeks, you have Jews, you have a lot of different ethnic groups in Turkey, but the vast majority of them are Turks.
But for example,
Sunni Muslim Turks.
Yeah, but for example, Turkey is one place where, whilst it is large majority of Muslim, they don't ban booze.
They don't ban it for their Christian minority. Remember, they have a very big Christian minority, particularly in Istanbul, which was essentially a Greek city for 2,000 years before the Turks took it. And they took it in 1453, I think. In any case, the Turks are not happy with the Israelis, and this is something that's been happening for some time. The Turks tried to break the Israeli blockade on the Gazans when they had a food and a sort of a big care package ship come to try to get to Gaza, and the Israeli commandos landed on that ship and killed, I think, a bunch of Turks, a handful of Turks, and that got the Turks really mad. What's happening now in Gaza and the endless slaughter that's happening there, that's also annoying the Turks. And remember, their people they have to worry about what their people are thinking. They don't want a revolution in their own country. Now, the Israelis have fought back, saying, "Well, what you do to your Kurds is really bad, and your diplomacy is really bad, and you crush and oppress your Kurds. What are you talking about? And your Armenians, look what you did to your Armenians back in the 20s, right? That was the first Holocaust that everyone seems to forget. It was the one that happened in 1915. So the Israelis are firing back. The problem is they're both right. They're both unconscionable. They're both oppressors. So it's like the pot calling the kettle black. Sorry, I couldn't get that out.
Yeah, but again, also Israel is accusing Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan as acting like a dictator.
Well, he's been acting like a dictator for a long time. The democracy hasn't made the inroads into Turkey as we had hoped, well, as the European Union had hoped. They have tried to become part of the European Union for many decades now and can't do it because they cannot live up to the standards of European democracy. They've never been able to hit that stride. And there's reasons for that. And if you talk to a Turk, I once talked to a Turk many years ago, and he says there's a large educated class of people. However, the largest class of people are still very poor farmer peasant types, and they will vote for the most conservative candidate and the one that talks mostly about religion at the time of elections. So when Erdogan, as you might recall, when he was being elected, he went around and he did a lot of religious stuff, like claimed to be a very, very good Muslim, and he abides himself by good Muslim laws and all that. So that attracts the humble voter among the Turks, and that's what seems to be holding back.
Okay, but Turkey is Israel's fifth biggest import, country for export, for importations.
Yeah, so obviously the United States would be number one, and oh god, yeah, and then and it's probably Saudi Arabia is in there and Egypt as well.
I don't think
the problem here is the problem here is this is a $7 billion trade that Erdogan is canceling. This is a trade network that benefited both the countries very well, and Erdogan is cutting it off. And yeah, he is a dictator because you'd find it hard to do that here in Canada. If the prime minister says, well, we've had it with Israel, now we're going to cut off trade. That doesn't happen that way here because the economic tendrils are not always politically responsive, no matter what. I mean, Coca-Cola did business with Nazi Germany right up to 1945. So did IBM. So that Shell did right up until they had declared war in 1941, or was it Texaco? Can't remember exactly, but it was one of the big oil companies. So you see what happens when the big companies come in; they don't really care who is in power. So it's all about the bottom line. Mm-hmm.
Shell is a Dutch company. It's likely they continued to trade with. They continued oil trade with Nazi Germany as soon, again as soon as it was taken over, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking more of the American ones like Texaco and Coke.
Yeah,
Fanta became the Coca-Cola sort of
but those
IBM helped them with their Holocaust statistics, and they. But in any case, aside from I put that out there because money finds no boundaries. It doesn't matter how corrupt or how
and it doesn't matter what
regime is.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter what an individual nation may well do. Traders in that nation may well take a different stance anyway.
Yeah, look, it's a matter of convenience, isn't it? Like we trade with Saudi Arabia; it's one of the most oppressive regimes in the world.
Yeah,
and we just always look the other way with the Saudis. Yeah. I mean, we do a lot of business with China, and they're rather oppressive. And look what they did to the Uyghurs. Did we do anything about cutting off trade?
Done nothing about it
with China because of that. No, we didn't.
Okay, so there was a. All right, go on.
No, it's just saying that. So this is a big deal. Colombia, and now Turkey. They're cutting off Israel, and right now the pressure is on all over the place. And we can see here in the University of Toronto, the protests are to divest from Israel, divest from any company that supports Israel, particularly militarily. That is what a lot of these protesters are all about. Now, you have all kinds of different aspects of the protest. Some idiots would be like Hamas supporters, and some others would be, radicals. But for the most part, most people are talking about making Palestine free if they can from the river to the sea. In other words, when the Likud party wants to claim all of the land from the river to the sea, that's the number one point in their charter. Well, the Palestinians want freedom from the river to the sea too. They have been backstabbed. The West Bank is being it's being renamed by Israel too, and it's also being filled up with more and more settlers. And the United States continues to look the other way. Britain keeps looking the other way. Canada wouldn't say anything if its mouth was full of it, because it's afraid, and it will just do what the United States tells it to do, which makes me very humiliated as a Canadian.
Yeah. Okay. So the question here also, Israelis protested on Saturday night calling for a ceasefire and the resignation of hardline Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So tens of thousands took to the streets in Tel Aviv with these demands, calling for new elections and accusing him of prolonging the conflict to keep himself in power.
But who can take over for him? The Israeli political outlook, its citizens have shifted hard right. They shifted hard right. And if they get rid of Netanyahu, they're going to get just somebody like Benny Gantz, I think, or whoever else is also very far to the right. They are shifting towards fascist territory. And that is not an overstatement. That is an overstatement. Generally speaking, they have a very dim view of the Palestinians. Generally speaking, they have a view of the Palestinians as less than human. They believe the story that says God gave them that land, and so they should take it. And the only way you can really take it is to push the people who live there out. That's what they're doing in the West Bank right now. When they finish demolishing Gaza, they will then try to settle it. They have done it before. They've said it again. The United States, Benjamin Netanyahu can't keep a lid on some of his ministers who keep claiming that's what they're going to do. He has to keep them in his cabinet because that's the only thing that's keeping his government afloat. He's a dangerous guy, and he's willing to kill as many Palestinians as it takes to get Gaza and get the West Bank. That is his goal. As a matter of fact, his goals are probably even bigger than that. He hopes to take a piece of the Sinai, a piece of Jordan, a piece of Syria, and a piece of Lebanon to go back to King David's extension of the Israeli Empire at the time, or that. So he's a pretty dangerous guy, and I think that as far as the Israelis are concerned, or the Americans are really concerned, they know that the USA is actually stands for the United States of Amnesia, and they will within a few months of the war coming to an end, they'll pretty much forget about it and go off to see what I don't know what J-Lo is doing, or I don't know whoever these stars are. But they got
that's fairly true. Many governments of the Europeans are moving to the right. The US will move that way too. We need to be wary of this, and it's true. There is a generalized, in most democracies, a generalized movement to the right.
Yes, there is, but it's understandable. It is pendulamic propensity. It's called. Yeah, and what happens is when the governments end up going too far to the left, then the pendulum swings the other way, and it usually goes past the middle point, too far to the right, and then it goes back the other way until it finds a balance.
But this is a
pandemic
this impact is beyond the move of a single government. It's a move that happens over a 30 or 40-year period. In the post-war era, we've been largely influenced by social democracy, and now in the 2000s we've been largely influenced by conservatism. And
yes, well, it's even affected the Liberal Party.
Pardon me?
Because the Liberal Party himself has become more conservative. That in 2015, Trudeau denounced the purchase of military jet aircraft, and he denounced the whole idea of arming up. And what did he just do a couple of years ago? He reinstated the conservative contract to buy those jet airplanes. He's also done a lot of other things that will be forced to do a lot of other things that has been left wing. For instance, the decriminalization of the drugs in British Columbia. We see that was a really bad idea. It was a good idea ideologically, decriminalize them and then try to treat the people so that they don't have to hide in corners and buy bad drugs. It didn't work, did it? And that was a shift to the left, and that shift to the left will now have to shift back to the right. And Angela says, well, this is happening. Human rights are getting clawed back. Which ones? Like, when you're talking about clawing back the legalization of drugs, is that a clawback of human rights?
And Mike saying he calls the USA the ununited states. Name a state name a state that's united in any topic. Well, I would call them disunited states, and I have been for quite some time. The last 15 years, disunited states of America has been in a mess.
I'm forgetting the intellectual I'm stealing this from, but it was the guy that wrote Lincoln, the book Lincoln, and not Gore Vidal. He, as often said, he was way ahead of his time. If you listen to some of his speeches and his talks way back 20, 30, 40 years ago, he will talk about the United States of amnesia. The United States does terrible things, gets involved in terrible things, and then within a month or so, it's forgotten about them.
Yeah.
That's why people are looking back in history and now making points that, the United States has not been the shining light on the hill of democracy. There is two United States, and I think I'm probably stealing this from him too. The United States that is the domestic United States, and the United States that is not. And you'll take thinkers like John Mersheimer, who will tell you, you can't count on ideals. Every country will do what it has to do to survive and what is in its best interest. And that, I suppose, is why the United States has supported terrible dictators and looked the other way, and so on.
Yeah, and you look at the world political map right now, and generally speaking, for example, the last Labour government, broadly left, in Britain was Tony Blair's one, which happened between 1997 and 2010. Other than a few odds and sods of governments, primarily Britain has been a conservative, has been a conservative nation for the last 50 years. Other than the Blair government, and people, they would argue that even the Blair government was just another conservative government under the banner of Labour. Now, the question here is that, and again, Merkel in Germany, there's been a lot of more to the right, more traditional conservative governments across most of the democratic world than there have been social democrat over the last 40 years.
I think it's just the swing. It's just the swing. Okay, you had Pierre Elliott Trudeau, followed by Mulroney, followed by Chrétien, followed by Harper, followed by Trudeau, and he will probably lose to the Conservatives.
Yeah.
If they are still in that zone, and who is liberal anyway? If you look at the Democrats in the United States, somebody like Joe Biden is more like a moderate Republican. He would be more like a moderate conservative up here. He wouldn't have been a Democrat or a liberal. We wouldn't consider him that up here. Bernie Sanders would be pretty much mainstream up here. He'd be a step to the left. He might not even be as far left as the NDP, but down there he's Bolshevik Bernie.
Yeah, exactly. And he's more likely to be a conservative in the broad church of the conservative, broad width that we have in the Conservative Party here.
So as long as they don't put on their jackboots or on the right, or they start talking Maoist dribble on the left, we're going to be okay. But the progressives end up being that, and the far right end up being closer to fascism, and those are areas that you just don't want to do. But honest conservatism and honest liberalism and even honest socialism is really nothing to be feared. But I don't know, the people's ideas are adjusting back and forth, and you have a democracy. And unfortunately, with our democracy, our Western democracies, is our people aren't educated well. They do need jerk reactions.
Yeah, that's true as well. Okay, so moving on, Qatar has stressed that he will not accept becoming a tool of pressure or to any party that is committed to maintaining its role as an honest mediator for mediation between Hamas and Israel. I'd love to know how that is going, because we're not really seeing any outward signs that there's actually any movement between anybody in terms of getting around the table.
Well, Qatar has been roundly criticized for maintaining relationships with Hamas. But they defend themselves, saying if we don't maintain relationship with Hamas, you'd have nobody to talk to.
Yeah.
And this is opening diplomatic channels. And when you look at and you think, well, you're opening diplomatic channels to an or terrorist organization. Yeah, you are. But you can't tell me that Israel's not a terrorist organization or has acted that way in how it treated the people of Gaza and the people of the West Bank. Everybody thinks the problems happened October 7th. No, they did not.
Yes.
October 7th was a terrible result of what has been going on since 1948. It's just one more chapter of murder. We murder you, you murder us. And that's exactly what's happening right now. You murder us and we'll murder you, and we'll see who ends up murdering the most in the end. And we're going to use oppression, and we're going to do reaction, and we're going to fight you with terror. We're going to fight you with oppression, and it goes on and on and on.
Yeah. And in order that Qatar actually manages to be that mediator, or at least maybe more in the future than it is right now, then it has to have diplomatic relations with both Hamas and Israel.
Yeah, it has to. It doesn't say that it likes Hamas, does it? It probably doesn't like Israel either. Now, this is Qatar, and what comes out of Qatar? What comes out of Qatar? What comes out of Doha? Al Jazeera. And what just happened to Al Jazeera? Al Jazeera is one of the best news agencies. I love Al Jazeera because they're pretty good. I mean, they're left of center, but they're a very strong news agency. They tell the story of the actual person on the ground, and because of that, Al Jazeera has been thrown out of Israel.
Yeah.
It has been made illegal. And Doha is where Al Jazeera comes from. And Doha, of course, is in Qatar. We know that Al Jazeera is a good news agency because the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia wanted to invade Qatar to get rid of what? Al Jazeera. They hated Al Jazeera. So you know Al Jazeera is doing something. So the Israelis just censored a major worldwide news organization, Al Jazeera, out of the effect that Al Jazeera is having. So that's another reason I think there is Israel will make sure that there's a lot of criticism of Qatar. However, how are you going to talk to Hamas? How are you going to talk to Hamas if you haven't got somebody that will make relationships there?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good question. You know, how are you going to actually talk to Hamas? The only way you're going to be able to talk to Hamas is from Qatar's viewpoint is essentially keep the phone lines open, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, we have to remind everybody here too, who financed Hamas? In the early days of Hamas, who financed them? Who helped them? It was the IDF, Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu apparently bragged about having they needed somebody, they wanted to divide and conquer, and so they helped. That's documented by, there's all kinds of news articles you can read about that. It's being pretty well dampened down, but it first came up when this whole war started. That was a common feature in the news, and of course you can't see it now anymore. It's like trying to find news about the oligarchs in Ukraine right now. You can't find any because nobody wants you to know about them.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know how Canada is going to do this. I know in the U of T, the University of Toronto, they have a Divest in Israel protest. This is not anti-Semitic. Let me point that out. There may be some fools that join into that, but it's kind of like the Confederate flag that was flown at the Ottawa convoy. Like some idiot brought that. Not anybody else would use that. And there are going to be idiots in all these protests in the United States and Canada and the universities. But basically, and I feel bad because there's a general ignorance of what's happened over the years, even among young students, about what's happened since 1900 and on, and the whole idea of Zionism and the expulsion of who we now call Palestinians, both Christian and Muslim. And nobody seems to know anything about that, but they do see Israel bombing the crap out of women and children, and that's why they don't want that to keep carrying on.
Yeah. That's that's a whole mess there, and absolutely. So, and we're back to where we started from at the beginning of this, which was about calls to defund Israel.
Yeah, well, the United States is never going to defund Israel. They protect them.
And a few student groups calling for defunding of Israel doesn't mean it's going to happen.
No, and remember, Joe Biden has taken a lot of criticism from the right as being anti-Israel. I don't think so. Joe Biden has been in the pocket of AIPAC for many, many years. I think he's taken over the years over $4 million from AIPAC. If you look at the benefactors from AIPAC, which is the Israeli lobby, Joe Biden sits at the very top.
Yeah.
So over the years, AIPAC has fed the campaign coffers of Joe Biden. They fed the campaign coffers of Hillary Clinton and Trump. So,
well, I was going to say in the Trump versus Biden question, Biden gets a lot of support from AIPAC, whereas that is being scaled down right now for Trump.
Biden's got to be the careful one here, because he needs the more liberal minded young people to vote for him. And right now, he is seen as a warmonger, genocide Joe. He's in pretty bad shape. I don't think he'll be able to survive it. There are many people now thinking that Trump will win the election because Biden is so bad an alternative, so much of a warmonger. And of course, the fact that he thinks his uncle's eaten by cannibals doesn't help much. It doesn't help that he said he saw with his own eyes babies with their heads cut off when none existed. He's told people about his son dying in Afghanistan, which didn't happen. And so combined with that, and combined with his rigid protection of Israel, it may cost him the next election, but we'll see. I mean, I really feel sorry for the Americans right now. Who do they have to choose? You got an egomaniac and a warmonger. Who are you going to choose?
Yeah, a tough choice. Yeah. All right, moving on. Brock, university expert, questions the usefulness of the province's reactionary classroom cell phone ban. Right. So just taking away cell phones doesn't teach anyone how to use it in a healthy way, says I don't know who it was that sells it. Naomi Andrews, who's assistant professor of child and youth studies at Brock University. And that's about all I can see of this article, Dave. You'll have to take it away.
Okay. Did you hit the subscribe button or?
No, I'm already a subscriber. I just can't read this article. As a subscriber, I can't read it for whatever reason.
Okay. Yeah. So what happens is if you go to the corner where it shows that little face, that little person there up in the corner.
I'm signed in.
And it won't let you read it, eh?
Yeah, it doesn't let me read it.
Okay. So so basically this is unfortunately it's not really written that well. It said it's kind of like sounds like poo. If you take away the cell phones, that's not going to do a whole lot. It is, apparently. It does say a little later on, it says here, it's not going to help with the questions of mental health, cyberbullying, to social media and social media addictions, and the struggles that the children have. Yes, it doesn't. It doesn't look at the whole thing. However, a little later on, it does admit that another spokesperson does say that, yes, it's generally thought to be a very positive thing. Get the cell phones out of the classrooms because they're extremely distracting. What it's trying to really do is tell you. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't know about you, but hey, I know I'm not a parent of this generation, but if I were a parent of this generation, I'd be saying, hey, I don't think little Johnny, you'll be getting a cell phone until you're 14, 15, 16, and you can buy one yourself.
Well, that's one parent. Unfortunately, most of the parents don't, and they want to keep in touch with the kids, and the kids are putting pressure on them. Everybody's got a cell phone nowadays, and that is the reality. What we haven't done is found out how to deal with the cell phone. And of course, the article here, basically, if you want to synthesize it, yes, it's a good idea. Get the cell phones away from the kids. Get them. Now, what this person has brought up is it's not going to solve a lot of the problems, because after school, the kids are still subject to cyberbullying and social media addiction. Social media is very addicting. It is made that way. It is designed that way. And every day they refine the ability to make it more addicting. Anything that's addicting, tobacco, alcohol, McDonald's, fast food. Anything that's addicting can be sold. So the people who design social media do it in a way to make it as addicting as possible, because that's how they're going to make money. The problem is it's hurting people. It's hurting people a lot. And so you have to, the only thing you can do with this is try to teach the children about the phone, about what it does, about social media addiction, and about how to deal with it. And we're not doing that right now. And that's pretty much what the one person says. But the first step, obviously, is to get those damn phones out of the classroom.
Yeah.
Kids are not learning. And nowadays, kids are being, and unfortunately, you can't hold back a kid. And you can't, if a kid done nothing at all in grade 5, you have to move them to grade 6. You can't hold them back anymore. And so now you got a kid that doesn't know how to read or write in grade 6. And then you got a kid that goes into grade 8, doesn't know how to read and write. And what you're happening is you're having the same thing that happened in the United States. Get the kid through, give him his marks, get him out there, give him his diploma. And then when he goes to his employer, he says, look, here's my grade 12 diploma. I can't read what it says on the diploma, but I graduated, So the problem here is they're not going to be able to reach these kids.
Well,
there is going to be no consequences for them to not pay attention.
The problem though is that, okay, you're focusing upon the bad side of that kid who can't read going out into the job market, but also I'll focus on the bad side of the fact that yes, there are lazy kids out there who can't be bothered to read, but there are also kids who have trouble.
I was one of them.
What?
I was one of them. I was a lazy kid that looked outside. But guess what? I learned how to read, write, and do arithmetic. I could care less about any of them, but I learned. Why? Because the teachers knew how to teach.
But there is also another class of kids who can't read, and those are the kids that actually can be highly intelligent, which can be in the top 10% percentile of people. Those that have dyslexia or associated diseases like Asperger's and the like, right? So
we're not talking about them, are we, though? We're talking about cell phone.
We're not. We're talking about cell phones. But again, the question here is that we aren't talking about those. No,
those people have been identified. Those people have been identified, and attention deficit disorders have been identified. We're not talking about those people that have been identified. We're talking about the average everyday kid who cannot learn because he has a phone on him.
Yeah. And generally speaking, as I say, I would say, don't give them phones.
Take them away.
Yeah.
Take them away.
Give them phones. Or if they come to school with phones, they put them in a box.
As I said before, when I was in school, they would take away our hockey cards or our baseball cards. They would take away the things that the girls liked and traded. They would take things away from us and give them back to us at the end of the day. And we were not used. And as a matter of fact, they wouldn't give them to us to go back into research. They held on to them the whole day. Sometimes, if you were bad enough, they'd hold on to them for the whole week.
Actually, many of those things that were taken away in our schools, they were never given back. Never.
Yes, you see, so there were consequences.
Yes.
To your actions, and if there are no consequences, all right. So the government did the right thing. The schools could not do it themselves. The schools could not ask their teachers take away the phones because I don't know, they're so spineless. I don't know why. So the government says, yeah, now you can take away those phones. Get those phones away because the teachers have been complaining. And as I've said before, I talked to a teacher in training right now. And that was her biggest problem was kids with phones in the class.
Yeah.
That was her biggest problem. And I told her, collect all the phones and put them in a box, give them back at the end of the day. and she was reluctant to do that. But
Well,
now she has the power to do it.
Yeah, every kid basically needs to put their phone in their basically put your phone in your locker and leave it in the locker.
Well, they're allowing to come to class and keep them off, which is not going to work. They're going to have to get them out of the class. I think every kid has to put their phone in a box and then take it to the next class the next day in a box. And but the older kids are allowed to use theirs. When you get 7 or 8 or something, you're allowed to use your phone during recess and between classes. But the little kids, they'll never stay off it because they don't. How are you going to tell a little kid, look, hey, it's a lot of fun having that phone. It's a way more interesting when I'm telling you about 3 + 5. It's way more interesting to watch TikTok. But guess what? You're not going to get anywhere watching TikTok. You have to learn what 3 + 2 is.
Yeah. Right.
I know it's 5 because I got hit on the head with a book.
Well, actually, there's an interesting one. My one day after being fed up with the kids and the way that they were reacting in school, our maths teacher basically gave us a Friday afternoon test, right, on our lesson, whenever it was on Friday, I can't remember. So those that performed, he then arranged the class. So Monday morning when you came into maths class, he's like, okay, you're not sitting, the door was locked, right? And he'd let one student in at a time. You sit there. And he dictated where they sat. You sit there, right? Every student would come in. They would sit at the table that they were assigned to. And eventually they were all sat in at the table. I normally sat near the front. But my seat was right at the back, right? Because I performed well on the test. So I got the back seat. But the seats at the front were reserved for the students who were laziest, didn't do well in test scores. Boy, did those kids who like to sit at the back of the classroom smarten up.
Well, in any case, the teacher needs all the tools they can, and the distraction of a cell phone is just something that now, is this a conservative backlash? Who would the liberals agree with this? How about the NDP?
I think
they think this is an infringement on the right of the student. I don't think you're going to get much blowback from the liberals and the NDP. I just don't know why the liberals and the NDP in the House at Queen's Park in Ontario would not stand up and contribute something to this and kind of say, yeah, you're on the right track here. Can we do the rest of it? Can we then teach kids about what the cell phone can do to you, the negative? Every kid knows the positive, goes on YouTube and finds something and connects with their friends. But how many of them know the negative, right?
Yep.
Chocolate cake, lots of positives to chocolate cake. Tastes great. Right, every spoonful, but it rots your teeth and it's not good for you. So,
yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, there you go. Hey, but hey, I want replicated chocolate cake, so it's not, so I don't get all the negative effects of it.
Yeah, sugar-free, artificial chocolate cake tastes like the real thing, but doesn't do anything.
Doesn't add a pound to your weight. Yes.
In fact, it's vitamin infused chocolate cake.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So that's kind of, I think that it's essential that we do need to have, more more, access to that, more attention paid in the classroom. And that's been one of the biggest problems, I think, over the last, this last generation of school kids.
I can tell you that if I had a cell phone when I was a kid, by the time I was in grade 12, I'd lucky if I'd gone as far as grade 5, because if I was permitted to have something that would distract me more than I was already distracted, I may never have got a high school diploma, because my teachers knew how to teach. They knew how to get through to a person like me who was completely uninterested in most everything they said. I mean, once grade 5 came along and we started talking about explorers, then all of a sudden I changed. I zoomed in. I became extremely interested in history and explorers and geography and all that other stuff. So that was somehow my teachers excited my knowledge in that, and that was my lead into becoming a better student.
Again, that's a whole point about school. It's a broad church of a lot of things that are being taught. And just because what attracted you to education was the fact that you liked about explorers, and you and I guess that what went on in young Dave's mind was, hey, I want to be one of those.
Yeah, I surely did. The
fact that there's nowhere new to explore right now other than the South Pole probably was the thing that held you back.
Well, I'll tell you an interesting story. I don't know if I told it on this show before, but I was a kid, and my grade 5 teacher was talking about, grade 6 teacher, one of them anyway, was saying, did you know that now we think of Captain Cook and his adventures all over the world and his exploring, but did you know that and you think of a sailing ship as a romantic, beautiful sailing ship, like, and he showed a big picture of, maybe the Cutty Sark or something. And he says, it wasn't like this at all. They had an old coal scow. That's the only thing they could afford to have him. So he had some old beat up coal scow, not romantic at all. And then he says to everyone and the kids, now, if you were an explorer, would you like this big romantic ship like this one? Or would you like some old coal scow to go around the world in? Everybody put up their hand for the romantic one. And for the coal scow, I put up my hand. And the teacher says, why, Dave? He said, and I said, well, I'm not romantic. 11-year-old Dave's wisdom.
But I want the fastest thing on the planet. I want the most knowledgeable technology on the planet. Hey, I want to go warp 6.
Yeah. Well, look at the humble ship that Captain Cook had, and the humble ship that was the Beagle that took Darwin around the world. Yeah. Those humble ships paid us huge dividends as people of the world. And you can talk about the fastest ships in the world, but it was like the Beagle and the old scow that Captain Cook was.
Yeah, they were never the fastest ships in the world, and that wasn't the point. Captain Cook's was probably pretty fast, but again, when you think about
for speed, it wasn't his point.
Yeah, exactly. It was made for exploration, and when you consider on one journey, I think one journey alone, he discovered more than most people know about this planet on one journey around the world, right? And he lost his life as well.
Yeah. When some Hawaiians stole one of his something, and he got caught without enough backup, and they killed him. It was the HMS Endeavor, they called it, commanded, and let's see if I can find anything. She was launched in 1764 as a collier. It was a coal ship.
Yeah, there you go.
And the Navy purchased it in 1768 for scientific mission to the Pacific and to explore the seas for the surmised Terra Australis Incognita, or unknown southern land.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah, well, he had a coal scow. Well, it wasn't a scow; it was a ship. It was a collier. It was made to haul
And
coal.
this is
Well, it must have
one.
been pretty seaworthy because no coal producer is going to risk having it having some
Yeah,
dump of the ship.
absolutely. Absolutely, yeah, and that's the whole point about this is that Cook, who's pretty well known to most cultures as being an example of a great explorer, actually was the guy who just ran a coal ship. Yeah, there you go.
These two are contemporaries. Captain Cook was the greatest sea explorer of all time, and David Thompson, who was a Canadian, was the greatest land explorer of all time, and they were contemporaries.
Yeah.
I've got a book on David Thompson now, which I hope to read soon.
Well, arguably, Vasco da Gama was actually Cook's ally.
Vasco da Gama happened two centuries before Cook, two and change before Cook.
No,
and he built his work was built on that of Bartholomew Diaz. Bartholomew Diaz was the one that went around Africa and discovered that Africa was around, and then Vasco da Gama, who was more politically connected, then with Bartholomew Diaz went around and discovered India.
Yeah.
And but then,
also we're talking about Magellan, but each of these are different eras.
Magellan's ship going circumnavigating the globe was an astonishing feat. Although Magellan, like Cook, didn't make it, he got murdered.
Yeah,
and as did Cook get murdered. So he didn't make it all the way himself, and only a tiny fraction of his sailors actually made it back to Spain. The second, probably the more important one, really was Drake, because he went around too. He went around the world, but and the only reason why he went around the world is he couldn't come back the way he came because he had made too many enemies along the coast of South America. So he circumnavigated the world. He did it a little bit better. But circumnavigating the world did not become a thing. A few people did it, like Magellan and Drake, but not a whole lot of people did it because it wasn't practical.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right. Yeah, but in fact, actually, when you consider what those kind of explorers did, and they spark the imagination in young kids, they should spark the imagination in young kids today. Except now, of course, our explorers have added to them people like Neil Armstrong.
Who's the guy that came up with the clock? Harrington? Is his name Harrington? I'm not sure. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, I don't recollect.
The exploration of Cook was fabulous. He was a great map maker and everything. But what was holding back everybody was the ability to have an accurate clock, so they could tell where they were on the Earth. And of this, I think I'm going to try to look it up really quick while we're still on. I think it was Harrington, but if not, I'll report back tomorrow. Clock. Harrington clock. Longitude found the story of Harrison's clock.
Harrison, yeah.
Yes. So Harrison was the guy that John Harrison, he made a clock that was so accurate that they could do longitude, and it was extremely important. And the British government put out a prize for the one that would come up with this best clock. Cook used Harrison's clock, and the government tried to pike out and not pay Harrison like they normally did. Finally, they did, the cheapskates. But Harrison, along with Cook, they opened the world to the rest of us.
And Harrison, I don't think actually got paid what he was really due.
No, but they did pay him something, but it was like pulling hen's teeth. You think he came up with this marvelous clock, and it was set in a place that would take it was on a system where it would go with the ship going back and forth like that, and the accuracy of it was way beyond its years in technology to be able to gear up something that was that accurate. I think it only lost 1 second in a year or something like that. It was amazing, which made it essential for navigating the world.
And what was even more important is that clock would, of course, be set to Greenwich Mean Time, and by looking at where the sun is in the sky, you can tell exactly how far off of Greenwich Mean Time you were, because of the solar position of the sun and the stars in the sky.
Precisely, and that helped map the whole world.
Yeah,
and we don't hear about Harrison, do we? We know about Hook, but we don't know about Harrison Cook, and we should.
Yeah, Cook's journey could not be possible but for Harrison's clocks.
Well, not and make the maps that he did.
Yeah.
Exactly. They used Captain Cook's maps of the St. Lawrence River for 200 years after he made them.
Yeah,
that's how good he was.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're going to have to call it quits at that point.
Yes, indeed. And let's keep the kids away from the phone so they can learn. And seriously, we have this resistance to learning, but once a little later on in life, we really do appreciate what we did learn. They did the clock. Christian Huygens in 1656. Yes, he had a clock too, but never as in ancient times they had the sundial. Yeah, they had all kinds of different ways of having a clock. The problem was to have one so accurate that you could calculate longitude.
Yeah, that was the point. You could keep the clock from back home that's accurate, to a second a year, and be around the other side of the world and know exactly how far from home you were.
That's right. It was an amazing thing.
Yeah, which meant that we didn't have to go in straight lines, or we didn't have to follow the coastline around. We could go in straight lines and go, in or diagonal. We could go in diagonals and out into areas that we didn't know existed.
Well, you could come across an island.
Okay,
you can,
here we go. Here we go.
And you can come across an island that you didn't you didn't know anything about, and be accurately map it and tell the next person where it was accurately, not generally. The atomic clocks that do today, atomic clocks are the thing nowadays, because they lose a second every 50,000 years. Like, I'm sure they can do better than that, don't you think?
Probably. Well, they don't actually lose much time at all, and we set ourselves to the atomic clock.
Well, the problem is the world doesn't always spin around at the same speed. The problem is the orbit is not exactly every time, and the sun and our revolutions wobble, and the suns do too, and all these things have to factor in. That's why we coming up with the leap seconds every once in a while.
Yeah. And there's actually a negative leap second, I think, happening this year.
Yeah, we talked about it on the show.
Yeah. All right. Well, that I think we can call it quits at that.
Without further ado, I bid you adieu from COVID Dave. Pray for peace, everyone. It's sickening out there. We got to stop this rubbish. And I don't know how the common person can do it, but, if any politician I talk to coming up to the next election, I'm going to put them on the carpet on that one.
Yeah, good idea.